and good to go.
All right, thank you. So we'll call the meeting to order. The first thing is Max did get the minutes out from our last meeting. And I did actually review them. Has everyone else had a chance to read those?
Yep, no issue here.
I don't think I had read those, or I might have, I don't remember now, sorry. Have to go.
Jen, I lost you there. Could you repeat that?
I don't remember if I read the minutes or not 2 weeks ago. And ready.
Oh,
The first meeting, I have to go look.
all right. If you want to take a minute and look at them, Max sent them out with the reminder a week ago about this meeting.
Yeah, it should have been sent out, I think, Thursday.
Yeah, got him.
We just go forward with another topic while Jen's taking a minute to read the minutes.
Yeah, let's do that. So I'll do the chair's report quick. I have an update on the Waldenboro Food Pantry van drive. We are the Waldenboro Food Pantry is fully funded and has in fact bought a new van. We bought a Ram ProMaster 3500. And the dealer is getting that. We found one locally. The dealer is getting that van prepared for us, and we should take delivery, I would think, next week at the absolute latest. So that's some really wonderful news. We ended up getting a $20,000 grant from Mary Turner over at Good Shepherd. And the rest of the money really came from local businesses and local citizens, and everybody kind of chipped in, and we were able to make our quite substantial nut on buying a van. So very grateful for that. Max, on the town update, I've noticed a lot of activity on Facebook with regard to the Friendship School. And also I understand there may be a rumor on some funding for a new medical center for Waldenboro. So maybe I'll hand that off to you.
All right, so just jump right into the town report, or Jen, are you all set with the minutes?
I'm all set with the minutes now, thanks.
Okay, could we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second,
Ruben seconds.
I think Ruben seconded there. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So
Ruben says aye.
It's passed unanimously. Thank you, Max.
Yes.
All right, so let's go to the town update.
Yeah.
Oh, before we do that, I'm so sorry. Before we do that, Ruben has asked that the CTC committee be rolled back into the EDC, Economic Development Committee, our committee, because they were having difficulty getting a quorum and getting meetings going, and there wasn't really a ton of activity moving forward. So he thought it made sense to have the EDC be responsible again for the CTC type activities. And that did make sense to me, and it made sense to him. So, and I believe the select board has approved that.
Yes.
That's a true statement. Okay. So, and we'll talk about that after the town update. We'll hand it over to Ruben to kind of give the EDC kind of an update on the CTC, where it's been, where it's going, and what's still on the desk to finish up. But okay, so back to you, Max.
So yeah, Friendship School. So I think I've kept everyone here in the loop on that one. We did our RFP during the winter, and we only had one proposal come back. That was done by Ron Phillips. And we had a planning board pre-application on March 3rd. This is something that we've done for applicants like Tim Wells and Volunteers of America when they wanted to do similar projects with the 80 grade school. We felt we wanted to have this done before we would actually enter into some negotiations going on. And well, Ron made his presentation. We told him, you know, this is your first big public one, so make sure it's one you're ready to show to the people. And we wanted to wait until the Lincoln County News article came out before we would go do anything with Ron. We wanted to see what the public's initial responses were going to be. You know, with Tim, we got a very mixed reception. Some people weren't really backing the idea, and a lot have some concerns about what were being said in the proposal. With Volunteers of America, it was, to a point, a well-received application when it was first presented, and that was when we were comfortable enough to go forward with the negotiations that led to the November 2020 vote, that then started what happened last year. So for Ron, we wanted to see which camp he was going to fall into, and when the meeting actually happened, it was pretty fine actually. There wasn't that much turnout. We did put our ad in the Lincoln County News. We sent notices out to the abutters. And only one household really showed up. And we just waited. The planning board had some thoughts, mostly concerning parking and whether or not there was actually going to be a retail space that was in the proposal. And that was all over really. There was also questions about the public park area and if they're going to do an addition on the top. There were questions from the board, obviously. So the article comes out. We kept hearing some different things from people about us already giving it away for $1. That Head Start was just out without it telling anyone. We were getting some different, questions. So we wanted to make sure we did a big notice on that. So we put something out on Facebook. I wrote a very, very long and hopefully detailed answer for a lot of people that ranges from just, we know that some people weren't aware in the beginning, but we have been trying to keep it very public throughout this process. We have done, the newspaper articles, we've done the select board discussions, we've been doing the RFPs, we've done all this stuff. We know it didn't reach everyone, but hopefully this Facebook post is going to address all those questions that we have been answering for some time. And something that I will note in this is that one of the potential people for that project is Bob Butler, a select board member and member of this committee, who's right now in the budget committee right now. Bob has recused himself from all conversations on it, especially as a select board member. He was actually at that planning board meeting and made sure to make a note to everyone saying, if I'm in these discussions, I'm part of the development team. I'm not on a select board member. So that was something that some people have raised when they looked at the proposal and they saw Bob's name on there. And we're aware of it. The select board members are aware how this is a very delicate situation, and we don't want to treat Bob any differently than we treat any other person who makes this type of offer. But in short, we're just waiting for people's responses, really. We've had some people say, great, you're doing something with the building. We've had some people say, oh, I wish it was affordable housing, or oh, I wish Head Start was still in the building. We're waiting to see what people say in general. We're letting the story go out. We're waiting for people to make some responses, and then we're going to move forward with a final decision. We are having a realtor look at the property to give us an idea for how much it will cost, or not cost, how much the building could possibly go for if we put it with a realtor. But even that, we could easily stop if the proposal with Ron is good enough for the residents. So we're just getting those responses right now.
How much publicity or how far out did the RFP go? I mean, could it be argued that that was all too quiet?
That's just it. We did put it out in Lincoln County News. We did put it out in the Portland Press Herald. I had someone from the Dodge Report New England who has always been asking about the building, so I gave it to him as well. I don't think I put it in Bangor Daily News. I think there was an issue at the time, but we did try those publications, and we didn't know what type of response we were going to get. With 80 Gray, we knew that it's always been marketed in the past, and it's not the best building. Whereas Friendship School, there was a lot of great potential there. It had waterfront property, so we thought getting it out there, we might have gotten someone more local to do the development. We might have had some interest from people. We didn't know what we were going to get really. But as I say in my Facebook post, we got the response from Ron, and we wanted to be respectful of the fact that he did respond to it. And so we were giving him that opportunity before we do another serious big publicity thing with more effort on it. But we want to be kind to him on this one. And again, if people say they're comfortable with the proposal, we can stick with the proposal. If people are saying let's do more advertisement, then it could be more advertising.
So it hasn't ever formally been on the market for sale, or has
It
it?
has not been with a realtor, if that's what the question is.
Okay.
Or a broker. No, when we just put out the RFP in November, but we didn't do any type of advertisement before then because Head Start was obviously in the building, and we wanted to be respectful of the fact that we had Head Start in the building.
How many square feet is the building, Max? Do you know?
It's 3 floors.
And it's gotta be like 2,000 square foot per floor or something, maybe?
Yeah, anyway, I think.
I think it's
Yeah.
like, I think it's about 2,000 a floor. Yeah, that sounds about, well, 2,000 for the first and second floor. Basement's going to be a bit less, but yeah, that sounds about right. I'd have to look at the RFP again.
Well, I think you guys are doing a terrific job. I think you're being fair to Bob and Ron. And if they come up with a proposal that makes sense for the town, the town gets to vote on it, right?
Yeah.
If it had just been sold, then the only thing that would constrain what happened to it would be just zoning laws.
So what do you mean?
Meaning that if the town owns the building and is weighing the options about how to proceed, an RFP is I would call it a better way to do it, because then you have a chance to have a say in the future of the building.
Right.
And the selling for $1 is probably how it becomes feasible to do all the upgrades.
Well, that's something that I want to point out with the RFP. First of all, for that $1, we just were giving a general give us the best offer type thing. Like the $1 is, and Ron's even sort of acknowledged this. This is that's a placeholder. So if we think that it should be more than $1, the town will ask for more than $1. Quite simply that. We've heard some people say, why are we giving everything away for $1? That was just what Ron suggested. And to the other point you did bring up of the RFP and what we want to put in, that's correct. We did make sure to note that it's in the historic village, so certain uses are and aren't allowed. And we did actually put in some preferences, mixed use housing, affordable housing, that would be nice. Maintaining that public green space that's near the water, that would be great. And I think that was even a big point in Ron's presentation for the planning board, where he said, I want to be able to one day get a river walk going on in that whole area. Although that raised the question, who's going to maintain that? But yeah, we took that into consideration. So when people said, why isn't it this or that? We didn't have the proposal written up. That was Ron's suggestion. That's what he thought was good for the building. We were open to affordable housing. We just had to see what proposals came through.
Yeah, I think from reading the Lincoln County News article that was thorough, there's a little bit of sticker shock for me that the average cost of an apartment in that building would be about $1,400 a month. And I know that rents are going up everywhere and housing is going up everywhere, but they must think that they can get people who will pay that, but it's a little disconcerting to me that there's such a need in this community for affordable housing, and that's where that's going to fall.
Right. Yeah, and that was, again, a common thing that came up of, just the price, how that was determined. And that's something I've also been a bit curious about how that was determined. And I think part of the proposal was going to be 5 or so years down the line, they'd be less apartments, more condos, since it's right near the water. And that might be a factor for why they determined that, but no,
I think just I hadn't thought about this much, but as much as we need affordable housing, I think it's, in terms of the town's future, I think there's probably real value in having less affordable housing. I mean,
but market rate.
yeah, right, not crazy, but a whole spectrum of kinds of places to live.
No, that's fair.
I'm not sure how that translates to economic development or anything, but I don't have a problem with making some high-end places to live.
So just to chime in, it would be, so the Lincoln County is working on a like a survey of housing needs in the county, which I think each town will probably be looked at, and it will be useful for all of us to have that data once that's complete. And as long as people want workers, they're going to need to, or we need to have what I call affordable housing. So it has to be something that is affordable to young families getting paid what businesses in town feel they can pay.
Mhm.
So, that it's what's more important, chicken or the egg, right? Workers, housing, people, housing for rich people, or housing for people who make more than most people make in town. I mean, it's a cycle, a circle, and a kind of a spiral. So,
But I do see Ron's perspective, which is, it's going to be a building that they're going to put a ton of money into, and it's on the waterfront. And I could see where, this is a for-profit proposition, not a charity proposition. I could
no,
see
absolutely.
I could see where, in fact, I think even 1,400, I'm not sure how many apartments he can get in there, but
He projected 5 if he's not doing any of the retail on the first floor.
okay. I mean, that's still a challenge. That's not a lot of money to pay for what he's got to pay for.
And they only have 1 or 2 bedrooms, so they're not made for families. Those, I mean,
Yeah.
might be for a young family perhaps, but that would be, but I looked at the submission to the planning board, and that's what they needed to make their numbers work.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
looked to me. So I don't think anybody was trying to make a killing on that. I wasn't speaking to this project when I was speaking to housing. I'm speaking to housing. I think when we talk about housing, we have to be cognizant of the challenges going on for businesses who cannot find people to hire, and the challenge that even if they could get people to hire, where would those people live? That's all.
That's a huge problem at Lincoln Health with our workforce. We cannot, we've had many skilled healthcare professionals turn down jobs here because they can't find a place to live that they can afford to live in. So, obviously with us being a small rural community hospital, we're getting people on 1 or 2 ends of the spectrum. We're usually getting doctors who are looking to start their career and build their career, or doctors who are really closer to the end of their career looking for a place to settle that they really love. Those docs have no problem being able to afford things here, but these other docs who are coming out of school with astronomical loans, some have accepted jobs here and then come up here and had to decline because they just simply, not that there's a lot out there, but when there is something out there, there's just, no affordability to it. And I respect Ron's position as well. If there's only 5 apartments, clearly the number has to be set at a certain place. And
Right.
you know, and I guess I'm a tad bit disappointed that when I say affordable housing, I don't mean low income housing. I mean housing that young families can afford, and the families that are going to sustain this community for years to come.
There's an irony. I know certainly when Natalie and I moved to Waldenboro, it was because of the affordable housing. It's really flopped on us.
Yeah. Well,
All right.
so that's what I have for friendship school. I mean, on the more positive note, I can talk about the community center that you mentioned a bit earlier.
Before you go there, can you so there was no response to the other school,
No
and
response.
so that's in limbo again, I guess.
That's in limbo. Volunteers in America has said that they are still interested if we're able to go through, but I'll remind everyone that they said that it's really not feasible to keep the building up to do their project. So that's something that the select board and I and Julie have been going back and forth on. One of the reasons we did the vote, and one of the reasons people likely voted for the housing was because it was going to save the school. So to get rid of the school, is that going to cause another issue?
So should we hire an architectural firm? Should the town hire an architectural firm to see if there is a way to save that building or not? Or do we already know that?
If I understood the issue, it was the bricks falling off in sheets, kind of like that store in Wisconsin.
It was that, and it's also the fact that when the school was made, it was done with that brick facade in mind. There's like a gap where you can't properly insulate it. So if they tried to insulate it to meet modern standards, it's likely gonna cause
bricks up.
It's gonna pop the bricks off. It's gonna cause some health issues as well, because that's gonna saturate and then get moldy. So there's a few issues with it.
Do we know what the bricks are like in the Friendship Street? Has that been examined to see? It's about the same vintage. It's actually even earlier.
If the proposal with Ron Phillips goes forward, it would involve them doing an engineering study as well. But from where I was, it wasn't a brick facade. It was like
It's a brick building.
it's a brick building. Yeah, like it's like I looked at the window. The brick was the same one that went from outside to inside.
Different design. Okay.
Yeah, it was an actual brick building. So it's older too. So with 80 Gray, we're gonna see what happens with Volunteers of America, how much they're really committed to it. And again, if Volunteers of America comes in and says we can do it, it's gonna cost all this amount. This is what we're gonna need. ... It still has to go to the town for a vote.
Right.
With that in mind, that it's going to be a demolition project, and then reconstruction.
Yep. All right. Sorry, guys.
No, it's
Now
fine.
the good news.
The good news, yes. So for those of you who are loving to watch U.S. Senate and House of Representatives debate, I don't even have to finish that sentence. For those of you who love watching Congress in action, last Thursday, Friday, you will likely heard the news that the $1.5 trillion federal budget passed this year. Hooray! It only took an extra 6 months. And part of it was the inclusion of earmark funding, which is something the federal government stopped doing about a decade or so ago. So a year ago, a planner here in Waldenboro decided to throw the hat in the ring and just ask for some money to go to the community center, which was something that fell under, I think, the USDA's Rural Development Program. And wouldn't you know it, Senator Angus King decided to throw that into the earmark funding. And so we will get $1 million to go to the project.
Wow.
So
Thank you, Angus, and person in the planning department.
yes, whoever they may be.
And if the town already has land, so you don't have to buy land, I would think $1 million would go quite a ways to building a building.
And I see Jen's emotion,
Yes, Jen.
emoji, whatever. Yeah.
Oh, she's
That's
celebrating, I think.
over.
True, celebration.
The unfortunate bit is that that was submitted when we thought we were going to put it at the rec center. And then we heard about all the wetlands when it was too late. So I don't know where the community center medical arts building is going to go at this moment. We are still looking at options because especially with $1 million from the federal government to help lower the cost, we don't want to lose this opportunity. I'm sorry, John, were you going to say something? I thought you were. I'm sorry.
I just think,
Sorry, you muted yourself.
I just think you should take the rest of the day off, Max. You've earned it.
Julie said I finally earned my nickname of Maximilian,
Oh,
but now I got to get the billion part.
yeah, there you go.
Years ago, there was consideration of using the Fieldcrest property for that because it's on Route 1. There's also the area at the intersection of 32 and 1 that people wanted to put a coffee machine or whatever it was. But
Where the old gas station was?
yeah, I'm not sure how big of an area you need, but I know they were years and years ago, they were talking about it would be good if it was on Route 1.
I don't know how Lincoln Health would feel about putting their medical arts building on a old gas station lot.
Well, there is that.
I mean,
And Jen's hands up. Jen,
Yeah, I
turn your volume up, Jen. We can hardly hear you.
I
well, no,
gotta-
she had her hand
no,
up.
I-
So
I got a hand up. I just got a question.
yeah,
Can you-
that's just for the waiting thing. Just to quickly answer George's thing. Again, we're looking at some spots. We're just not saying anything right now because especially with the $1 million, and I'll go on a bit later on this, but with the $1 million, people are going to make a lot of assumptions, and I'll get to that in a minute. And I really need to make sure. That's why I need to be careful with how this is crafted. But Jen first.
Okay, so my question is the community center going to be merged with the medical arts center still? Or is it now with this new new influx of funds, would it be considered separate as a separate project?
That would be a question for Julie probably because she's been more involved in it. And I think it comes down to whether or not it's going to be at a certain lot. Because if it's a big enough lot, then we definitely would want to have it together. I think that was the whole point of it from the beginning. If it can't be together, maybe because we think it's better to put a community center on a gas station, or maybe Lincoln Health wants to take, I don't know, Benny's or something. But the point is, if we have a big enough lot to put the two together, we would like to keep the two together because we think it's going to be a great mix together. But I feel with this $1 million, we're now a bit of on a time crunch. So if we can't find it, we're going to have to talk with Lincoln Health a bit more on what to do going forward. And I'll even, and the other part is that I don't have all the details on this just yet. That's why I haven't done this big celebratory dance or anything, because I still have to wait for the federal government, who's going to give me that $1 million check, to call me and say, what's my timeline? How am I going to get the funding and what restrictions are in place for it? Because, I mean, again, they were supposed to give us a check so that we spend it by the end of the federal government's fiscal year, which would be September 30th of this year. So we don't have too much time if that's the case.
Max, how much land do you think you need for one facility? How much would you need for the two?
I don't remember how much Lincoln Health will need, but I believe for Waldenboro, we'd need maybe an acre, and that's considering the parking. And you also have to consider about expansions in the future. We don't want to be too constrained. That's why I've always been a bit hesitant with 80 Gray being a community center spot or even the medical arts building spot, because you're going to be on ledge, and
is there no workable way to, like, what is it, mitigate the wetlands or trade something or? I
We
mean,
can if we're willing to spend like 4 times as much to buy a spot that that is prime for development that we're never gonna develop.
I meant the space that we thought it was gonna go on turns out to have too much wetlands. Is that, am I getting that right?
There are significant wetlands, yes.
Right, and does that mean, is there no recourse to, trade something, or I thought there was ways you could use wetlands if you did stuff.
We could spend a lot more money. I think it's like, they have a tiered system for once you hit 20,000 square feet, which we're easily gonna do before we even get to the community center. Just for the driveway alone. Once you hit 20,000 square feet, you need a special permit, and then from then on, you're adding on like a certain amount per square footage that goes over that. Alternatively, we could buy a piece of land that's 4 times the size of what we're going to
It is
develop.
not wet.
That's not wet and would be primed for development, which I feel if I was to do that,
That would be an expensive piece of land.
people will it's expensive piece of land, and I think people would want my head on the pike at that point.
Oh, you got $1 million stool to stand on to save your head.
So that's the bit I was gonna get on. When I applied for it, the goal in mind was the $1 million would be lessening the bond that we're gonna have to do for this community. Because if everyone remembers back in November 2020, that wonderful time so long ago, it was imagined that the town would likely have to bond maybe $2 million to do that community center. Obviously, prices have gone up. The federal government's kind of expecting us to put some skin in the game for this a bit later on. So that million was more of saying, if it's going to be a $2 million project, as cost effective as it can, then it's only $1 million. And if it's going to be a $3 million project, it's only $2 million. That's why I'm worried about always thinking about we just have an extra $1 million. Not really. That million is just so that this community with a high poverty rate doesn't have to foot the entire bill for what should be a cost-effective project.
So what's the next step? Is it you quietly considering other locations and looking into them?
Next step is for the federal government to tell me my restrictions for this, because initially it was supposed to be focused more on site work than anything. The driveway, sewer expansion, parking just for Lincoln Health. That way we could spend all the $1 million. Lincoln Health could build their facility, and then the town could come in maybe a year or two later with the bonded funds to then build their community center. That was my initial vision. I need to make sure that that's fine with the USDA standards, and then see what timeline I'm working with. Once I know that, then I can work out a game plan with Julie and the select board.
Hey, Max, just real quick, I'm a little surprised to hear that original location you'd thought of, and I know there's wetlands behind it, but I thought we had a discussion a few months back that there was still plenty of dry land that the town owned in that parcel
Where the
that
ball
we could use.
No, that, in fact, when I showed that to the guy from the DEP and I said, we've had these ball fields here for this entire time. He said, yeah, I don't know who let that slip with us back then. It shouldn't have ever been built.
In the ball fields.
Even the ball fields. That entire lot is, like, I'd have to show it, but that entire lot is wetlands.
I don't want to sound disrespectful, but there's a point where,
Remember that we're recording.
yeah, I mean, we never would have made it up Route 1 if we then could have built a bridge.
All right. Well, that's good. So how can the EDC help you, Max?
Sorry, I'm blanking. Well, I'm just updating people right now. If you ever hear anyone say that the town now has $1 million, just tell them yes, but no. And that
Yeah.
it's a lot more complicated than it is. That million that I've already seen someone talk about it on Facebook. That million is not supposed to make the Taj Mahal of community center buildings. It's supposed to make something that gets the job done. And you know, I need to see what that $1 million is right now. If it's something where we have to have it spent by fall, then we're gonna do some special town meetings then. We're gonna go
Yeah.
from 0 to 60 really quickly.
And to your point, if the feds expect us to put some skin in the game, you're going to need some town votes to put skin in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
And John has his hand up.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, just from the Lincoln Health perspective and being in conversations with our leadership team over the last couple of years about, the desire to have, a new medical office in that area. All of that a good portion of that funding would come from our health system, which is the main health system. And it would be a capital budget request. And those certainly don't happen in a very short period of time. So just in terms of the, obviously with the last couple of years of COVID, our capital budget as a healthcare system has been cut way back. Hopefully things will get better and we'll be able to, again, do some more reinvesting. But I think if there is that tight of a timeline for Lincoln Health to participate in anything that's happening, it's probably going to be near an impossibility.
Well, as I said, this is something that I'm gonna have to talk to the federal government about or USDA, whatever it is. Because they are aware that a lot of communities, like everyone, had this in mind that they were going to get money last October, and now here we are in March just being told that they're going to get it, and the funds aren't going to be available until maybe May. That's my guess. So to expect people to have it done in 4 months, it's a lot to ask.
Yeah.
So that's why I have to clarify a lot of that stuff. And as I mentioned, and John, I'm actually glad you brought up Lincoln Health, Maine Health's part in this. That was actually what part of the application we had to put in there, where in terms of matching funds, us doing the $1 million sort of site work, groundwork on getting it all set was going to be the federal government's role, and then Lincoln Health, Maine Health would come in with their contribution to the capital funding for that match. And then again, the town would come in with their funding for the community center as a match. So I would be a strong believer in saying that I think because of the partnership that has been going on for the past, I don't know how long, few years, I'll say few years. I think that's why we got the funding, because just a community center might have been a tough sell. But you'll see some other communities like Bath or Bath will be the first in my mind. They got 1.5, I think, for the YMCA to expand on their childcare program. Yeah, I think they're the only ones in Saginaw that got funding. But that was a huge component because they were working with the YMCA on this matter, and it was going to address a huge need in that location. For us to just say community center, especially with how vague we are, it might not have gone anywhere. So I want to take a moment to thank Lincoln Health, Maine Health, for partnering with us on this whole program. And just a minor thing while we're talking about federal funding, I also got funding for the Council of Governments, who I do work for and contract out here with. I got funding for them for law enforcement purchase equipment as well. So communities from Brunswick all the way up to Northport, they're going to be allowed to submit requests to say, hey, our law enforcement agents have this broken piece of equipment. Can you give us some funding to replace it? And we're going to be working with them to say, yes, we can give you that money. So
Awesome.
I assume I'm Chief Lash's favorite person right now.
Good job, Max. Thank you.
I think Angus King should be re-mentioned here too.
Yes, Senator King did a very valuable service in getting this funding, and Senator Collins was also helping with the law enforcement purchase equipment. Both of them agreed on that one, and the community center was an Angus King post one. And there is another earmark going on right now, so I'm gonna try and see what we can do with that one. Got to be ready for next year, apparently.
I gotta believe that with COVID, whatever their deadlines were, with any common sense at all, they will give you enough time to design something.
I'm hoping they can give us like a 1-year extension.
Yeah, that
would make a lot of things easier.
So you mentioned something that's interesting, going back to the conversations that we had in our last couple of meetings for the Route 1 commercial center that we were thinking about, or commerce center, I guess. Did I hear right that the thinking is that maybe we could use this facility to kind of still go in that kind of a direction? Is that the thinking?
I think I mentioned this in a previous meeting. It would cost $1 million alone just to get the water from the old Route 1 Main Street intersection to where the pump station is, where the cigarette shop is. That alone is $1 million. I don't think we're gonna get this Route 1 commercial area developed. We could get sewer there and maybe a public road, but we're not gonna get water there. It's not gonna be a fully serviced area.
All right.
Unless we can find a new.
But wherever we build this facility, you're going to need sewer and water.
That would be ideal, or a wellhead that can service such a huge amount of people.
Mind you, would you like an update on the eel business?
I was about to say, we probably, before we get to that, there's just one thing I do want to mention on a more unfortunate note. So Scott Simpson, who was the chair of the planning board and was a member of here for a bit, he's unfortunately had to resign from his boards and committee work just for some matters. He just wanted to get out at this point, and he's been overwhelmed a bit with all of this stuff that's been going on. So I respect him on that. He's done a lot of work, and yeah, it's just, it was unfortunate to see him go. And the planning board certainly has lost a great member, and I hope we'll find someone else to take his spot, especially with what's going on right now. We've had one of the most interesting cases that Jen is aware of, and we're still going at it with them, and maybe that's why Scott left.
Oh, all right.
I'm kidding.
It's a tough job, that one.
It's a tough job. It's
Yeah.
a long hours, and I can see why people don't want to be on it a lot, but it's very important to have a fully stacked planning board. And without Scott, we now pretty much need almost all members to attend to have a quorum. So it's hard, but I wish him the best.
So I assume that you're reaching out for membership on the planning board.
If you ever know anyone who just has a free second Thursday night and they are just itching to be involved in the town's development.
All right. And you had something else, or is that it?
George has.
Only that the.
Go ahead, George.
Is leaping ahead. It's all closed in. I've been inside. It's probably 1 million gallons estimated worth of tankage that will have eels in it at some point. With all the treatment, it's amazing what they've done in that. The system is amazing. No corners were cut at all. And I think they're going to have big eels in there from this spring. This spring's eels.
Wow.
Doesn't elder season start next week?
Yeah, I'm not sure they'll have them in there by a week and a half, but in there, they plan to have eels growing in there this summer.
Are they going to do a grand opening or anything like that, George?
Everybody had to.
I'd love to see it.
Sarah has been most willing to give short tours, but I don't. In a way, it's kind of photogenic in there, but it's also a very full building of equipment. So it's
Okay.
like there's panoramas that you will enjoy. But yeah, I'm sure that we could get a tour in there from her when they're a little further along. But it's really amazing in there.
George, are they getting their water from a well?
The water, they're getting it from my well, yeah. That's how come I'm in this loop, is I had the well that would qualify and it's near the river for the discharge. So yeah, they've done all those steps. They've got the discharge in now. And this week they're actually going to put their own pump in my well. And then instead of me giving them water, they will be giving me water. But, yeah, it's
All right. All right, thank you. Ruben, you want to give us kind of a status on the CTC and kind of what the current action items are?
Sure. So as we already covered, the CTC had a couple of meetings in a row where if we had a major issue to vote on, we wouldn't have been able to. Our focus right now is on, filling the remaining unserved pockets, which in a few meetings we kind of arrived at. We need to just get a whole fiber network in all of Waldenboro. So with all of that in mind, I requested to the select board that we dissolve the CTC and roll it back to sort of where it originated, which is as a member of this group. And in this group with you all, we have a great, a great set of brain power. So thank you for welcoming us back to that role. And what Max and I have been up to is talking about getting an RFC going to see what the cost and necessary actions would be to get an ISP to build a town-wide fiber network. And there will be, there are future states of that where we would negotiate or talk about all the different pieces of that. But right now it's really just a sort of broad question to get us a price tag. We had a great conversation with CCI, which is consolidated. And that was, unless Max, something new, that was the last thing we did.
Yep. Ruben and I have been working on what's going to be a survey for the town, probably through SurveyMonkey, where we're just gonna, similar to the internet survey that was done a while ago, we're just gonna ask people to give their thoughts on their current internet service and what their thoughts are on potentially seeking a town-wide system. We're going to use that information and then go out to RFP for some service providers to see if there is interest in doing a town-wide service. And we'll get hopefully get a planning grant to pay for any feasibility study that we're going to have to do as a result of that RFP. If it's a private business that's going to do an upgrade to the network in this town so that it's a privately owned network, we're open to that. If it's going to be an open access network that the town owns or a nonprofit owns, we can look into that. Nothing's really final at this point. We're just starting out and initially need to see if residents want this 100 by 100 internet service. And so that's going to be something that I'll be sending out to the EDC soon, so that we can get an idea of if there's any improvements to the questions that we're going to be asking.
And then, of course, it always comes down to cost.
Yep.
And that's going to be part of it. Yeah.
That's going to, I mean, that was for me personally here. I mean, I got fiber running right past the house, but, I really didn't want to pay a whole bunch more money for that service. And so that's the challenge, I think.
I got
There
five,
would be,
sorry.
go ahead,
What
Jen.
was that, Jen?
I got fiber running right by me, and because there's no ISP, I can't even get, not even the option. It runs right down Route 1.
All right. So that's good. That's wow, that's a great launch. Townwide fiber. That's great.
No.
Ruben, that's a good one.
Yeah.
And there's the secondary benefit we're after is most people in town right now have access to one major ISP. If we're successful, it would give everyone access to two. That would also create some competition.
So would Spectrum use that as well?
No, well, they're welcome to if Spectrum wants to jump on the fiber game. Spectrum is its own thing. What the secondary benefit for Spectrum, if you're in an area that is served by Spectrum and there's fiber internet with competitive speeds that are, faster up and down than they are, what you get is the Spectrum services typically decrease in cost by whatever amount.
Yeah,
And that's going to depend on what the offering is.
yeah.
Yeah, I think there was an article Ruben and I were looking at where Charter was upping the amount of download speeds that they were offering in some of the bigger communities in Maine, because that's where the competition's starting to ramp up. So
That's in Portland. In Portland, you can get up to a gig down and 500 up on Spectrum in very specific areas due to a new tech they're deploying. In other areas, they'll just take their $65 product and make it like 35 or 40.
They'll make it
Honestly,
so,
that's-
yeah,
yeah. Once you have your line up for delivering internet, aside from managing broken lines and stuff, it's a high profit margin. And I'm not critical of that. If I had enough money to start an ISP, I'd be all over it. That's, it's based on demand. But when you have two people doing that, you're forced to get there. So what I really want to do at the end of all this is get our remaining unserved people hooked up. But this is not necessarily a rich town, and
yeah,
lack of access to those high-speed connections means lack of access to being able to compete, even in terms of education or business. So it could really level a playing field. And in my personal opinion, it could pay a lot back in the secondary benefits once you get those systems set up.
So, so Ruben, your committee was going to work on you and Max are working on the survey?
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, all right. And we'll get a chance to review it
yep.
at some point.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to do a vote on that by next meeting, or if you just want to look at it and say, yep, it all looks good, do the Survey Monkey as soon as you can.
I'd like to see it before we vote on it.
Well, yeah.
So if
but
we have
I'm not
questions.
gonna do that, but I
Yeah.
meant like through emails, if you're gonna say, it all looks good, we don't have to wait to the meeting, or if you want to just wait until it'll be April to whether you want to vote on those questions.
Yeah, I mean, you and Ruben know how urgent it is to get out, and we're flexible. We could do it via email for sure, if you want us to.
Right.
All right, good. Ruben, anything else?
No, that's everything. Thank you. And
Okay.
thank you again for welcoming this piece back. I
Our
feel a
pleasure.
lot better having some additional people to think about things.
Some warm bodies.
Yeah, well, that's what we need for these things, right?
Yeah. All right. Hey, John, COVID update. I think we got some good news.
Yeah, it's really amazing how the Omicron variant kind of fell off the table, if you will, in the last 2 or 3 weeks. This week, we've had a slight uptick in positive cases and percentage of positives, but for comparison, this week, I believe we had, these are just rough numbers, roughly 40 cases of 40 positive cases, and 2 months ago, we had 1,200. For the week. So it's just amazing. Actually, I may have misspoke there, so I'm going to have to check my numbers, but it is an astronomically different number. We are testing. That's what I just gave you. I gave you the testing numbers. We were testing about 1,200 people a week. Last week, we tested around 240. So
Okay.
The positive number was way off there. I apologize, but it just, the positives are way down. I think, the good news is that we're having that success. The bad news is we're still struggling with capacity in our hospitals. Lincoln Health is still full. It's still, every bed is still taken, which kind of puts us in a position where we've sort of got to plan surgeries, what people would call elective surgeries but truly aren't elective. They're like hip replacements and things like that,
Right.
that require an overnight stay. We've got to check to see that we're going to have a bed available for that patient, or we may have to delay that surgery until we do. That I think you're going to see healthcare systems trying to catch up to that. One thing that this community is lucky with is Lincoln Health has been doing that all through COVID, where other hospitals have simply said no elective surgeries at all. We've been trying to make it work throughout, but there is hope, and there is some optimism.
Little light at the end of the tunnel, maybe?
Well, I think
Tiny?
I think that the misnomer, and this is me, I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV, but the misnomer is that COVID's going to be over at some point. And the reality is, I don't know that, in talking to medical folks, I don't know that it's ever going to be over per se, but I think it may get to the point where it's classified more as what they call an endemic over a pandemic, like the flu, for example.
Right.
Each year there are new variants of the flu, and the vaccine is adjusted accordingly. We know a lot more now than we did 2 years ago about COVID-19. And we also know as community members what we ought to be doing to protect ourselves the best way possible. New news today, Pfizer is now looking for emergency use authorization for a 4th dose because they believe that that's necessary. Too early to tell here whether that's what's going to happen in our communities. But, I think one of the things that's really terrific is we've learned as a healthcare system how to I hate the word pivot because it's overused, but how to pivot and adjust and get through these really, really difficult times. I mean, it's really hard to believe that Saturday was the 2-year anniversary of COVID coming to Maine. It's just, but we've adapted. There's been a lot of losses along the way, but we have a very high vaccination rate in the state and in our communities. That certainly isn't hurting. But yes, I'm hoping that we're at the point now where we can sort of get back to some of the things and get people the surgeries that they've had to wait for, and be able to have some sense of what the new normal is. But I do think that COVID will still be around. Yes, George.
Would you say that we've progressed to the point where the cases are much less severe, or that we're better at treating them? I mean, are we at a point where we could just kind of have this be what COVID is and
right
our lives?
So again, not having a medical degree or an MD after my name, I hesitate a little bit to answer that. But what I'm seeing is the Omicron variant, unlike the Delta, was less severe. It caused more hospitalizations at times just because of the size and the scope of it. But there were a lot of people getting the Omicron, and not all of them were getting into the hospital. The problem was there was just such a mass amount of them, their hospitalizations were really, really high. There are new oral medications that have come out and are being used recently with some effect. There's been infusion therapy that's been fairly successful if you catch COVID early enough and get those infusions going in the first 5 or so days. So again, there are more tools in the toolkit, if you will, than we knew existed a couple of years ago. So I'm hoping that science keeps pace with what our needs are to battle this disease, and that's the hope. But I think there is reason to be optimistic at this particular point. But every China is in the news now because they're having a massive outbreak again. So you take that deep sigh and breath, but at the same time you hope you don't take anything for granted at this particular point in time. It's the same thing with the influenza shot, though. I mean, the best thing that happened to the influenza virus, I hate to say it, in my opinion, was COVID, because people are getting their flu shot. The people who weren't getting their flu shot in the past are getting it now, and we're getting high rates.
I got my first flu shot ever.
Yep.
Because of that.
And I think you're going to see more people do that because it's part of the protection package, right? And I know that the vaccine folks are working on a combination shot where your COVID shot will also be your flu shot, so you can get it all done in one deal. So yeah, I think everything is advancing in the right direction, but I think it's also probably fairly naive to think that COVID is gone for good and that we're not going to have something else that we'll have to deal with as a new variant comes along.
Yeah, George.
I think, I guess I call it recovery. I think that as time has gone by, the images of refrigerated trucks full of dead people is gradually fading. So I mean, I think we can get back to kind of a more tolerable state of mind on this, which should help all kinds of things.
Yeah, I agree. And the lack of isolation certainly is going to help everybody concerned as we sit here and do a Zoom meeting again. But, you know, the other thing is, I'll put on my PR guy hat for just a second. If people are not boosted, they really need to consider getting boosted, because that booster shot for many people is the difference between being hospitalized and really sick and not being hospitalized. We have seen just tremendous data that shows that third shot keeps people out of the hospital and makes the recovery from the COVID, from getting COVID, much easier on folks.
Are you dealing with any of this long COVID, as I hear about in the news sometimes?
Yeah, and that's pretty much everywhere. I mean, long COVID is something that's impacting. I mean, unfortunately for some people, they're really having a tough time with it.
Okay. All right, I'll be quiet.
All right, thanks, John. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well.
I don't know if we have any old business that we need to discuss. I don't think we do. I think we're pretty good. Any new business anybody wants to bring forward?
I think I've mentioned the TIF a few times.
Oh.
I don't know if I ever mentioned that the solar farms wouldn't count in a TIF district, so I'm not gonna do that. Depending on how some things go, I might try and see if we can put a TIF amendment in the November ballots, but I'm gonna hold off on that for now.
I mean, it's money in the bank while we wait, all right?
Money in the bank, and I have to have someone confirm my numbers, but I think we have about 5,000 pulled up over the 2 years it's been established.
And that's pre-eel building?
Pre-eels and land or building valuation, reevaluations that Daryl's doing right now. So I'm expecting a pretty good uptick in a few months. That 5,000 was primarily generated from the kitchen from Odd Alewives. Well, actually, still American United, because you had to subdivide that lot.
Oh, yeah.
So that actually contributed to it. There were a few parcels actually that had some slight developments, and it did uptick to just quite a bit. But yeah, combined, it was about 2,000 first year, 3,000 the second year. So it's still respectable stuff. Once we see what we get this year.
What does $1 million translate? $1 million of investment translate to TIF money? Is that just the tax rate times?
What do you mean?
If the eel factory was $1 million,
If the eel factory was valued at $1 million,
right, what would that do to the 5,000?
But bring it up quite a bit, because my 5,000 is based on the difference in values from when it was first created.
Yeah.
Times whatever our mill rate is right now. So I mean, 18.2 for every 1,000.
So that's good. Yeah.
It's quite a bit of money. So yeah.
The eel building is.
So the eel building is worth $1 million, right?
I believe, yes.
You're promising me that.
Yes.
I'm expecting that when Daryl does his valuation. So maybe in May or June, we'll actually have an idea of what all this money is going to be able to do, especially on a annual basis, and then we can really start putting forward an idea to start using that money with, like it could be the feasibility thing for this townwide fiber. It could be the implementation of townwide fiber. It could be whatever the Sylvania Development Committee is eventually going to do with Sylvania. It could be, it could actually be the site work probably for the medical arts building and community center, depending on the location. So there's a lot of potential, really.
All right.
So
Well, I think we've gone past by about 13
Yeah.
minutes here.
Hey, I have just one other clarification.
Of
So
course.
that I look more intelligent than I actually am. I did look up the number of positive cases in comparison. So 2 months ago, we had 283 positives in a week. This last week, we had 36. So not quite as dramatic as I had earlier painted, but it's still pretty impressive.
That's still a feel-good statement. Like,
It really is.
that's not a bad mark to my evening. I gotta be honest, John. That's pretty good.
that's what,
Yeah.
a 90% drop?
Agreed.
And some of those positive cases never came to the hospital, I assume.
John, you're muted again.
They would have
muted,
been
John.
tested, they would have been tested at our facility, but many of them would not have been hospitalized. You're absolutely correct.
So there's proportionally, again, there's an awful lot fewer people on death's door.
I think that's a fair statement. Yeah, I agree.
John, what was the number of positive cases in the last 2 weeks that you mentioned?
In the last week, we had 36 positive cases.
36.
And 2 months ago, the same, a week's time, we hit our high water mark with 283 positive cases.
So yeah, it's like 85 to 90% difference. Yeah, that's
Pretty significant.
yeah, pretty big.
And just a reminder, since this is a special meeting, kind of in the middle of the month, we're only a few weeks away from our next meeting. So I was thinking, in terms of the survey that you want to do, we could probably talk about it at our next meeting.
Yeah, that's that actually sounds a lot better.
Yeah, that
Okay.
sounds great.
So I'll send out the survey before I head out today.
All right, I'm going to call the meeting, gentlemen, ladies.
Sounds good.
Thank you.